In today's episode of Dance Med Spotlight, I am interviewing Kendall Alway. She is a physical therapist who specializes in working with dancers. She's the owner of SF Performing Arts Physical Therapy and is a contracted physical therapist for San Francisco Ballet and Lines Ballet, among other companies. She sees dancers from a lot of different disciplines, from principal dancers to adult beginners, and really has so much great knowledge for working with a variety of dancers. She also is the creator of a program called PointSafe, which is a rigorous ballet teacher training and certification program that has been going for a few years now. It's all online and provides a lot of really great information for dance teachers who want to further their education and continue helping their dancers in other ways. Make sure that you check out this episode because we talk a lot about things that apply to maybe clinicians and folks who want to get a little bit more technical about things. We talk about stuff for dance teachers and the dancers themselves. So as always, we've got a lot of different topics to check out. Be sure to listen. Welcome back to another episode of Dance Med Spotlight, where we talk about all things dance medicine and dance science. Today, I'm excited to be talking with my guest, Kendall Alway. Welcome, Kendall.
Hello. So excited to be here.
So, Kendall, my number one question for everyone is, what got you to this point of doing what you do in the dance community?
It's kind of a really long story. I don't know if you really want the whole thing because I'm kind of old and it took a circuitous route. But I started out, I was a ballet kid, and I left ballet partially because I was just finding it wasn't very healthy for me. And then I ended up in in college, then I ended up starting to take dance classes, and they were like, well, they approached me and they said, well, you really should be a major in our department. And so I started taking classes there, and I was getting a BFA in drawing, and printmaking, and I drawing, painting, printmaking. And so when I switched, I've always had like a real interest in healthcare. My dad's a doctor. When I graduated from college, I left for New York. A bunch of us went to New York from Ohio University. And I had several roommates from Ohio University, and we were having a wonderful time in New York. But it was also a very, very hard time because it was the early 90s. I moved there New Year's Eve of 1989, and it was the height of the AIDS pandemic. And I very quickly got involved in the AIDS activism movement. And it was actually a group called ACT UP. I learned how to read, journal articles, medical journal articles. So they would have these meetings where they taught you how to read journal articles and stuff.
Oh, wow.
Which was really amazing.
Yeah.
And they had meetings where they would explain what treatments are available and not available. Of course, it was AZT, but anyway, that's a long story. But it was like the idea of medicine became a little bit more accessible to me through that group. I like to say it was the best of times and the worst of times. But I was also dancing in a modern company at that time that no longer exists, called Pouquet Eccentric Motions. And so we were doing, some North American touring, and I was working with ACT UP, and I had all my weird, odd jobs on the side. Because when we weren't working, it was like being a freelance professional dancer. And so when I went, I hit 30, and I was kind of really getting worried about what my future was going to look like in professional dance. At that point, I had left Seattle. I had left New York and moved to Seattle. And I couldn't get a dance job. like, it was really weird, and I was like, "Seriously? I just danced in Serious Fun at Lincoln Center. Like, why can't I get a job here?"
Yeah.
It was mystifying, and, but in any case, I think I don't know what it was. Maybe I was too desperate. I have no idea. But I couldn't get a job, so I'm like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to figure out what the next phases of my life are gonna look like."
Mhm.
And I didn't really want a desk job. And I figured, well, I've been learning exercises my entire life. So maybe I can help people with that. I got a job
Mhm.
at a physical therapy clinic as an aide, and I had to take all the math and science courses I had never taken previously in undergrad in my BFA.
Yeah.
And when um, but I still was like, really a part of the arts community. I had exhibited a little bit in New York, and I I was just really wanting to maybe maintain a job in the art world. And so I interviewed somebody. I was planning on going to architecture school, actually. So I was
Mm.
sort of torn between physical therapy and architecture school.
Yeah.
Um, and then a very smart, helpful person who owned an architecture practice told me that at that time I shouldn't be an architect because women can't get architecture jobs. And as a physical therapist, I could always work anywhere. And so I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, yeah, okay." So I was used to this freelance life, very, very hard life,
Yeah.
all these different jobs. And so I was like, "Oh, if I get this, PT thing, this PT license, then I can work anywhere in the country, basically, just switch the license. And
Mhm.
I can work maybe not where I want, but I can work."
Yeah.
And so I was excited about that. And then when I went to PT school, I kind of I had a very different movement background from basically everybody else in my class. I
Mhm.
was older than everybody else in my class because I was a second career person. And I was sort of like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be a PT. And I actually almost interviewed for a job in San Francisco with a design company.
Mm.
It's kind of funny, right? I mean, it's like a
Yeah,
weird world. Like I was like
right.
a dog being pulled by a leash down the sidewalk, looking for this physical therapy. I was like, this seems like a good idea, but maybe there's something else for me. So, but then when I got out of school, I found more like-minded people. I pretty quickly started a little part-time office in the back of a dance studio
Mhm.
in Seattle. And everything sort of grew from there. And then I came to San Francisco, and now I own SF Performing Arts PT. So I'm very happy about that, and
Mhm.
things are things are going very well right now in San Francisco. Sadly, because people are injured a lot. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, but I think that I understand dancers and how they work.
Mhm.
And I always actually had really, really clean technique. And so I was very interested in treating dancers and helping them with technique problems, actually.
Yeah.
And
That's huge.
figuring out how I could use exercise to correct technique errors and then
Mhm.
combine the things. So even when I had my first office in the dance studio, I would try to only schedule people when there weren't dancers in the studio so that I could also work with the dancers on a sparring
Mm.
floor
Yeah.
and not on carpet, or, whatever. Like, I always thought I need to adequately treat dancers, of any type, I need enough room to do fouette turns
Mhm.
and a
Right.
little, holding your space back, tombe pas lead. Maybe no
Mhm.
lead. Or just a little
Exa
tati.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so anyway,
Yeah.
I have a real love for it, and I really feel like I found my place in the world
Mhm.
with it.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure. Well, and with what you do now, you have an opportunity to work with a lot of different kinds of dancers too, not only with San Francisco Ballet and other dancers who maybe come in, adult beginners. I don't know if you see a lot of like adolescent dancers, but just a really nice variety of folks that you're able to help.
Yeah, and sometimes I get like Irish dancers. I've had actually my oldest dancer patient was a tap dancer.
Hmm.
And they're really all ages, and sometimes it's people who aren't actively dancing, but they have a dance background.
Yeah.
And it's like we still speak the same language, and they just pick things up like, you know, like you
Hmm.
can plug into that dancer identity, and they're like, "Oh, I know what to do now." And
Definitely.
um, and so it's been when I have students come into the clinic, they're always like, "Wow, it's a lot more different kinds of people than I thought there would be."
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and like 90% are dancers, to be honest. And now with San Francisco Ballet, there's a lot of ballet. And
Yeah.
the front part of my office is the point shop. So it makes it even more balletic, it's just kind of funny. Uh, you know, I, I had sometimes the professional ballet dancers want to hear about my ballet background.
Hmm.
And I'm sure that you've experienced this too. They're like, "Well, where
Oh
did
yeah.
you study? What was your training? Who were your teachers?" Because it's such a
Mhm.
legacy thing.
It is, definitely. Well, and I still live in the community that I grew up in, and the studio still exists. And so, we always have all of these conversations. Like right now, I have a client who his mom was coming in with him, and we figured out that, so of course, I know their studio, but they have some connection to another studio that I have a connection with. And then she's good friends with somebody that I grew up dancing with at a different studio in town. And it's just this whole little circle of things, and everybody knows everybody. And it's fascinating as we start to dive into it. And exactly to your point, a lot of times they're asking, oh, did you dance, or that sort of thing, and they're always shocked even when I tell them that I do still dance too. But it's great to be able to have that as like a little bonding thing with them.
I know, it really is. It was super fun. The other day I had this experience with one of the ballet dancers, and
Mhm.
they asked me, we were talking about rubies, diamonds, that Balanchine ballet. And so
Mhm.
I said, rubies was always my favorite. And they said, "Oh, it's my favorite too." And I said, my training was Balanchine. And so we started talking about, I never went to School of American Ballet, but I trained at the Briansky Center in Saratoga Springs, where a lot of
Mm.
the kids from there went, and New York City Ballet was there for the summer. So we saw
Mhm.
them every weekend. That was our thing. They bus us in to see the ballet every weekend.
Oh, that's so
Um,
fun.
and I I told him the story that I don't tell it too much, but I would stand in these stinging nettles so that I could get an angle to see into the rehearsal studio to watch New York City Ballet. And
Mhm. That's
I
amazing.
had worn a sundress that day because it was really hot summer New York, and
Mhm.
in Saratoga Springs, and my legs started swelling, and I went to the stage door because I just thought I saw some dancers coming and going, and I was always trying to get more autographs on my programs. And the guard saw me and saw my legs swelling, which I really didn't care that much about, to be honest, because
Mhm.
my priority was seeing the dancers,
Of course.
like superheroes. So I went. He took me backstage to see the doctor,
Mhm.
backstage to put ice on my legs. And then I was sitting on this table with the ice on my legs, and I was like, and I think he gave me some Benadryl, and I was like watching the dancers, like my heroes, go back and forth, like across the door. And it was
Oh my
like,
gosh.
as a little teenager, it was like one of the most exciting moments. And so I
Mhm.
I shared the story with this dancer who said, "Oh, well, which dancers did you see? Which dancers were performing at that time?" And so
Yeah.
we talked about that, and they were very excited, and they were like, "Do you remember who partnered who?" And I was like, "No."
Right.
And I was 59. I was 14.
Mhm. Mhm.
But
That's hilarious.
yeah, I mean, it was just uh really fun, and it just made me remember what a touchstone that is, having that background
Mhm.
with other people. And I'm thinking about like your experience with being a kid and staying in your studio.
Yeah.
Like, you now are probably treating the children of your friends.
Yeah, I see people, I mean,
Yeah.
whether it's other family members of them or, like, I now occasionally take a tap class from somebody that I grew up taking classes with, and I sometimes see some of her dancers that she sends over, and, yeah, it's just it's crazy, all of the connections, and again, that legacy thing that you were talking about, it is so much of that.
It's so much. And yeah, I'm almost at the point where, I mean, if I treat for another 5 years in San Francisco, where I will probably be seeing some of the children of people I treated when they were dancing full time,
Mhm,
or more seriously anyway, or freelancers or whatever. And
mhm.
um, that's just super exciting. You
Yeah.
know, I
And
just,
and the other thing too is, getting to know some of these dancers, especially because I have the chance to work with a lot of adolescent dancers in my practice. I get to know their families, and then I end up treating their families. So, also being in that position where, I think sometimes dancers, at least historically, sometimes have had a bit of a distrust of medical professionals because being afraid of being told, "Just stop dancing, you can't do this anymore," that sort of thing, so they just don't wanna see them. But getting to that point of the dancer and their families trusting me enough to see multiple people in their family is also really, it's a big honor to me, when they choose to do that.
it is an honor, isn't it? To have
Mhm.
that kind of trust.
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah, because there's
amazing.
millions of other people they could go see.
I know. And especially because, they have to, unless the company has a contract with me, like the person has to pay out of pocket. So it's
Mhm.
like, you know, there there's a lot of motivation to um I mean, I guess it's reassuring that, like, wow, what I did was effective enough to, have their friends and family come. Um
Mhm.
and that is great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, with working with the dancers that you do and that you've been able to work with, what are maybe some of the, like, more common injuries that you see or even some of the more common, like, instigators of some of those injuries that you see?
Okay, I love to talk about it. Okay, foot and ankle injuries. Foot and ankle injuries are well documented to be the biggest group of injuries, right?
Mhm.
And so the mechanism of injury is really that the dancer is dancing from their feet and not their core, right? So they're dancing from their feet. They're not using their psoas. They're not using their glutes. They're not using the back sides of their legs. They're dancing from the front side of their body. They're paying attention to shape. They're trying to get a banana foot and stretching the heck out of their foot. And, like, we start doing exercises, and I'm like, stop pointing your feet, stop pointing your feet, stop pointing your feet. And they're like, oh, I can feel that a lot more in my hip now. I'm like, right, because you are overusing your feet and you're underusing the other muscles. So don't dance
Mhm.
with your feet. And especially with some of, like, these flexor health, as long as these big toe tendinitises, um, I've been really happy with the results working with some of the dancers to get them to not point so hard with their big toe and say, oh, maybe use your other toes to point your foot and leave the big toe alone. And they're like, oh, it
Mhm.
doesn't hurt anymore. It's like, yes. So it's like when they have these little technique errors, it's really satisfying to be able to help them to fix it. Right. And so
Mhm.
um, we can go back and forth between technique, exercise, technique, exercise, technique, exercise. And uh, but with those foot and ankle injuries, it's it's really that. And it's the same
Mhm.
thing with then going up the kinetic chain, because around the ankles, then so you have the toes, the toe overuse, tendinitises, and then the tendinitises along the sides of the ankle, the peroneal tendinitises, the tibialis posterior tendinitises, because they're just gripping. And maybe sometimes they've even been taught not to over squeeze their Achilles when they point their foot, but then they're gripping with these other tendons still.
Mhm. Yeah.
And getting them to figure out how to mobilize the backside of their body, use the backside of their body, lift out of their hips,
Mhm.
and uh, dance from these other places is going to help a lot. So it's like the shin splints are the same thing.
Yeah.
So sometimes the teacher will be saying, get your heels down in the jumps, get your heels down in the jumps. But the dancer is still overloading the forefoot.
Mhm.
So the heels down in the jumps are, I don't know, I don't think as important as keeping the posterior chain muscles firing as they land from the jump.
Yeah.
Because if the weight is too far forward on the ball of the foot, then the shear force is going to go into their shin.
Yeah, I think, thinking about some of these different pieces, it's like, something that popped into my mind as you're talking about this too is even watching dancers sometimes doing like a releve and watching them do it barefoot or in thin socks or something. And or trying to hold turnout. And both of them, they are gripping with their lives with their little toes in order to
I
accomplish it,
know
but
it.
trying to get them to feel what it feels like to use the rotator muscles of their hip or something like that. Like, sometimes that's half of an appointment is just figuring out how to get them to feel it from the places that are supposed to be helping a lot more than they currently want to, and to get them to break the habit of using those poor little toes and other things to
I know.
help them do it in the first place.
I know. I'm like, those muscles are so small. Leave
Yeah,
them alone.
exactly. They're tired.
They're going to do what they're going to do if you don't overwork them.
Mhm.
Um,
Definitely.
and it's like the overworking comes from, it's the whole culture of dance is like, try harder, do more, go bigger, do blah. And
Yeah.
so everybody tries to do that. And then also, you're supposed to, as a student, take the corrections from everybody in class, right? And apply them
Mhm.
to yourself. So then you're applying these corrections that maybe don't apply to you, to your own body. And it gets very confusing. So then you just end up clenching all of your muscles because you're trying to work
Mhm.
so hard. And then you're injured.
Yeah.
And, like unpacking all of that can be an intense process. It's like,
Mhm.
well, you have to be able to convince people, right?
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And
well,
even something as simple as, like, one of my favorite sort of, like, easy ways to sell this concept of look at what a difference it makes when you learn how to do it from the right place
mhm,
is even, like, an arm for a port de bras or in your second position at the bar where you can hold that arm up using lots of muscles to get you
mhm,
there, but if you get good at really being stable around the scapula, the shoulder blade on the rib cage, and
mhm,
engage there, the rest of it becomes so much easier, and you can live there forever before it starts getting tired, as opposed to using all of those other muscles. And sometimes when they're really having a hard time with this buy-in of me trying to tell them, "Let's get you to work from someplace else," we even just try that, and they go, "Oh, that's so much easier. Okay, this makes sense. Now how do I do it for the other things you're talking about?" And I love when they have that aha moment, and get them to sort of join the bandwagon that I have of being strong and having the control more centrally to then help you further down the chain.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And sometimes it's really challenging because they'll be like, but my teacher wants this. And I'll be like, trust me, if we fix your technique this way, your teacher's going to like what they see.
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, no, they won't. You know, like, especially if it's a kid.
Yeah.
I'm not supposed to do it that way. And you do have to, you know, like fulfill the aesthetic requirement. It's an aesthetic thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had, sorry, now I'm talking about two things at once. Let me get back to the teachers. So I,
That's all right. I do the same thing all the time.
I get excited and I get really tangential. But the, you know, I'll tell them, I think this is the spirit of what your teacher is looking for when they give you that correction.
Mm-hmm.
I think the way that you're applying that correction is messing you up. And so sometimes I'll say something like that.
Yeah.
And because the teacher, most of the teachers are actually pretty skilled and are telling them the right information, but like it's going through a weird filter in the person's head and
Mm-hmm.
they're modifying the information or doing what they think they hear the teacher saying and
Yes.
not what the teacher is actually looking for.
Yes.
So many with the professionals, so many times they're like, "Oh, I wish I would have learned this information sooner."
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why then I started the teacher training program
Mm-hmm.
that I do. But yeah, because I think it's like if we as professionals, the more we can help the teachers, you know, the tide has sort of turned where the teachers, I think, are like, yeah, this is great. We love it.
Yes.
Um, and that's what I'm finding more and more. The
Mm-hmm.
teachers are very excited to get the information, and the teachers want continuing ed.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite places to present every year is the Colorado Dance Education Organization. They do an annual conference where they have a teacher's track and a dancer's track. And I've been presenting in both tracks pretty much since I've been involved with the organization. But the teachers who go there, yeah, they are so hungry to learn more. And, there are people talking about a lot of different things, whether it's folks like me talking about health and wellness and, things like that, dietitians. They talk about pedagogy. They talk about, maybe they get introduced to other dance styles. Like we've taken Bollywood classes and classical Chinese and things like that just to get exposure to other movement forms. But I mean, that is such a fun place to be, and the people are so enthusiastic about learning. So I am always excited to go back to that conference, and we'll prioritize that conference over other things that come up that also sound exciting, just because I know how much fun it really is and how much they enjoy it.
Well, I think that National Dance Educators Conference overlaps with IADMS a lot, or
Hmm.
it's really close. And it's like I want, IADMS, International Association for Dance Medicine and Science, where you and I chat quite often.
Yes, exactly.
um, I really want to go to that National Dance Educators Conference, and it's always like butts right up against IADMS, and I have a lot of patients to see. I can't always take that much time off of work, and
Exactly.
so I am just dying to go to that. And um, I I I don't know. Maybe we should talk to IADMS about the dates. I mean, I
Yeah.
know it's a little different. The next conference is in Las Vegas, so I
Yep.
know that that's a little bit different, but I don't know if you know the way the dates are overlapping on that, but
Yeah. Yeah. I think it would be worth investigating. That's for sure.
I think so too. I think so
Because I've
too.
I've had the same thought. Like this year, I think they're back to back weekends. And with international, or with IADMS being an international event this year in Italy, that makes it a
Gets me
lot
back.
harder too.
No, you can't do it.
Yeah.
But at least the next one is in Las Vegas, so maybe I don't know where the Dance Educators Conference is gonna be, but
Hmm.
it'd be cool if it's
Yes.
down the street.
Right? That would be very convenient. So you've already kind of alluded to this, but I want you to talk more specifically about it. You have the PointSafe program. For people who are not familiar with what this is, give them your little spiel of what is PointSafe.
Okay. I love PointSafe. So a few times a year we have it's a robust teacher certification course, and it's under the auspices of sort of helping to get your students safely on point.
Mhm,
So it's 8 weeks, and we do 8 weeks online meeting. There's homework. The teachers have to video their classes. So they have
mm,
assignments that they have to submit every week, and we watch each other's videos from each other's classes. So
oh,
the
nice.
teachers can answer each other's questions and stuff sometimes. And it's really good for them to see there's all these different cultures of studios of teachers that take, and it's so great. We have teachers who are expected to put their kids on point with only like one ballet class a week.
Mm,
And then we talk about, oh, what's the workaround for that? Can you guys have a studio meeting with the director of the studio? If you go with the director of the studio, can you talk to them about how to insert some of these exercises, some of these pre-point tests into the curriculum of the other classes?
mhm.
We really try to problem solve for each individual specific setting that they're teaching in.
That's
So,
awesome.
yeah, because some are from conservatories, some are from competition schools, and so if they're from a heavy competition school and the kid is just rehearsing their YAGP thing, and not taking class, they're still sort of expected on the same timeline. So it's been
Mhm,
really interesting because the sort of hard line approach to going on point is to at least 2 years of 3 classes a week,
mhm.
right? And 12 years old.
Yep.
And the truth of the matter is that the the kids are going on point earlier and earlier, I feel like.
Yeah.
Have you found that?
Yeah. I've seen, I think 10 has been a fairly consistent number that I've been seeing.
Yeah. And so officially, dance medicine says, no, 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 only 12. But maybe
Mhm.
that's not the culture of that studio.
Right.
And if it's a Vaganova studio, they start on at 10, but they're not really doing anything in their shoes at 10. They're just
Mhm.
like and so
Right.
it really, like, to have these sort of like hardcore rules, I think is not realistic in our world.
Mhm.
And also
Mhm.
the point shoes are being marketed, like Instagram is a wonderful marketing tool, and people do what they see on Instagram. They do
Yeah.
sometimes crazy things that they see on Instagram. They and
Mhm.
Instagram can be wonderful. Like, it's a very double-edged sword, right? It can be
Right.
wonderful, wonderful, and it can just be a disaster for people. So, in terms of the kind of advice they get, whether it's quality advice or not, and
Mhm.
so I just think, like, what we do in Point Safe is we go week by week learning like some anatomy and some exercises for different areas. And we do the point tests, which you can find on YouTube or whatever, but
Mhm.
you can't necessarily find, like, what are we looking for in the test? How do
Right.
you develop the students so that they can pass the tests? Why
Mhm.
don't we, like, video your kids they have to video their students doing the test each week. Each week is a new test. And, like the Elevate test, like the pencil test. I did not invent these. These are
Right.
well documented in the literature, and
Yeah.
they can be looked up, but this is a much more comprehensive approach to looking at things. I've never
Mhm.
been a very black and white person. I've always been like, well, let's look at this from a different perspective. And
Mhm.
I try to meet people sort of where they are so that we can help them with the health of their students, and then they have to it's comprehensive, and they have to do a video checkout with me at the end, a
Mhm.
one-on-one checkout. And they have to present their videos that they took of their classes and talk about them with the other teachers.
Mhm.
And they really have the opportunity to develop, I think, as teachers. And so there's certain teachers for which it's not really new information, and they're super, and that's great. Actually, those teachers, the whole group benefits from having them, because then they
Yeah.
can give their information and what they've found to the other teachers.
Mhm.
And then we have like quarterly alumni meetings and stuff like that,
That's awesome.
where we can continue to problem solve. But it's really, I love teaching the teachers.
Mhm.
I really do.
Yeah,
They are, that's how you get the biggest ripple in the pond, right?
exactly.
Not helping one person at a time.
Mhm.
And we're in the process of putting together a PointSafe for parents, so that they have a video that they can play in their studio, and then they
Mhm.
can be the one to do the Q&A with the parents when their group is ready to go on point.
Mm. Yeah, that's awesome. I
Um,
love that.
yeah, so it's really something that is flexible, that they can use, and we can problem solve together. And sometimes they bring up individual students too. Sometimes I'm
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, that person needs a doctor. We talk
Yeah.
about when to refer to a doctor, when to refer to a physical therapist, what different injuries are as well.
That's always something that I sneak into my presentations when I'm especially teaching teachers or parents, but I'll also mention it in some form to the dancers themselves, even the kids that I'm doing a presentation or class for, where it's like, here are things to pay attention to, where like it might be a good idea to go see somebody and that sort of stuff, and like how to even find a good person in the first place and all of that. And I think, to what you were saying there of kind of that ripple effect, I think those sorts of things is where we can truly make the biggest impact. Even if they don't get every little nuance of every little thing that we bring up in a class, if they walk away with one more good piece of information, or they learn how to be a little bit more critical of something that they encounter, or they know who to go to if something comes up, all of that is already a win in my book.
Yeah, and it's like, if you as a practitioner, like, you teach your patients this, you teach the teachers this, we integrate this into the culture, and that the
Mhm.
dance teacher, it's not their, like, sometimes they're really relieved to know that it's not their responsibility
Yeah.
to help treat this injury.
Mhm. Exactly. They have plenty to do already.
They have so
They have
much,
more than enough on their plates.
and they work so hard, and they try so hard.
Mhm.
And I mean, I just remember when I was dancing professionally in New York, I I had a really severe ankle sprain, like really, really bad.
Mhm.
I had a little fracture, and like, it was bad. I was carrying my laundry down the stairs, and I fell down a flight of
Oh,
marble
no.
stairs with like my 40-pound bag of laundry to take to the laundromat, and
Mhm.
from my 5-floor walk up.
Gosh.
And like, somebody told me, "Oh, you go to the bodega and you get this root, and you grind the root, and you wrap your ankle with the root, ground
Mhm.
root," which did absolutely nothing. It it was,
Mhm.
but you try so hard as a dancer, and the students are the same way. Like, "Oh,
Yeah.
my friend told me that what I should do is this."
Mhm.
And so we want to try to kind of interrupt that sort of loop.
Yeah. And one of the things that I noticed too is I always feel for the parents who don't have a dance background and or don't have any sort of health or medicine background, because a lot of times they're seeing what is being done by the people around them or things on social media and all of that, and they don't know what is, the more safe practice, or that the thing that their child is being asked to do is not actually the best idea, or things like that. And so they do the absolute best that they can, But there's a limit to, if you don't know, you just don't know. It's hard to make the right decision sometimes. And so being able to provide some of that relief for the parents as well, um, so that they know that there's somebody that they can trust, to help their dancer. And then we know how dance studios are. Parents love telling other parents how things are going, and I have this connection to somebody and blah blah blah. And so that right there has a huge ripple effect when you're able to impact one of the parents. That's going to spread like wildfire with the rest of the parents that they interact with.
Yeah, that's why I want to do this video for the parents. I'm super
Mhm.
excited about that for our certified teachers.
Yeah, that sounds awesome for sure.
Yeah.
And I think, coming back to that idea too of continuing education opportunities for the dance teachers is
Mhm.
such an important one, because there's definitely, it's not a requirement, first of all, to
Yeah.
be a dance teacher, and the amount of what is available isn't nearly like what you or I as physical therapists have access to for continuing education on a million different topics that we could
Right.
choose from.
Right.
And so being able to have something there for the teachers is really important. And again, somebody who's a trusted source for that information.
Yeah. And so the more of this that comes out, the better.
Hmm.
I mean, we really want just more and more and more of this good quality education for the teachers.
Yes.
Um, yeah, it makes me really happy to see when other people come out with continuing ed courses for the teachers too,
Hmm.
because um, yeah, they, it's just really great. It's really satisfying, well, what I do, it's kind of hard. Like, not everybody passes the certification the first time through. Sometimes they have to do it again.
Hmm.
Um, But, then we know that they really know what they're doing, you know?
Yes.
And
Yeah. It's not just I showed up for class,
I
pass.
wish there were more and more certifications
Hmm.
available for ballet teachers.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big proponent of that, and that's part of the reason why I wanna go to, the, Dance Educators Conference and stuff like that, so that we
Hmm.
can start to open that conversation. Because the university professors, they do, continuing education,
Hmm.
but
Yep.
the bulk of the dancers are not in university programs. They're, you know, free ranging all over the place.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think, with even since I was a kid dancing, some of the trends of what they're getting trained to do, incorporating more acrobatics, encouragement of bigger movements, more flexibility, uh, do 1,000 turns instead of just two, because
No,
two
I
used to
don't.
be pretty impressive.
Everybody's now supposed to do 8 pirouettes in a row because of Instagram.
Right.
I'm like, well, why?
Right. Or like
Yeah,
some of these leaps that turn into a, you know, somersault at the end as you're landing and things like that. And I mean, it's just getting more and more complex and higher expectations of how the dancers are moving, more intricate choreography. And then again, social media, we see things
I know,
like, some,
I
I
know.
don't know if you saw the video of I think it was a Chinese company, if I'm remembering correctly, and the dancer on point was on the male dancer's shoulder in an arabesque as he's like
I
walking around the stage. And it's like,
I know.
okay, is this what we're going to do next? Like,
There's another one where she's on his head. I think it's the
mhm,
same people. And, yeah, I don't know why. And so, with the oversplits question, sometimes I'll get teachers who are like, "Yeah, I do oversplits," and I talk about labral tears and hip injuries, and how when you have really shallow hip sockets, there's probably some hip dysplasia already. And
yeah,
so, if you have a really shallow hip socket, you shouldn't be overstretching it like that,
mhm,
and because it could cause a labral tear and other instability in the hips. So, if I have a patient who's been doing a ton of oversplits, I make them do this test where, oh, Sorry, that was my cat coming through the cat flap. That's Walter. So he likes to announce his, I've arrived.
I understand.
Anyway, but if I have a patient that is used to doing a lot of oversplits, right? What I do is I have them oversplit with one foot just on a foam roller. Okay, which usually they're like, okay, but there's not feeling a stretch, so like it's not a stretch. So then I have them lift up their pelvis with their hands, and then I'm like, okay, hold yourself there and let go with your hands, and like their pelvis goes slamming to the floor, and I'm like, okay, when you can hold this up and you can do 5 raising, lowering, raising, lowering, raising, lowering. When you can do 5 of those, then you can oversplit more than the foam roller.
Yep.
But you got to stop with the one foot on a chair thing, and that whole 15 yoga blocks. Yeah, so it's like, if I've treated plenty of contortionists too, so we have a big adult circus community in San Francisco, and I've treated adult contortionists, and these are people who started contortion training in their 20s, and they're really strong. Contortionists are crazy strong.
Yeah.
But these kids are doing things that the contortionists are doing, and they're not strong enough to do it. They don't have the kind of strength training that the contortionists have.
Yes.
Because
It makes me think back to a quote from Catherine Vargo, another one of our dance PT folks that we know and love through IADAMS and Dance USA and a variety of different organizations. But her quote of, with great flexibility comes great responsibility.
I use the same quote.
Yes. Yes. Where if you want to have that flexibility, you need to have the strength to support it.
You need to have the strength.
That is what helps make it safer to do if you're going to do it.
That's why I'm a big fan of having like an objective test with it. Hold yourself up. Bam.
Yeah. Or the dancers who come in and they want to do, développé or something like that. And they're like, when I use my hand, I can get it up here. But when I try getting my leg there, I can only go to here. It's like, well, we need to work on some strength then in order to help get you where you can passively go using other parts of your body or a wall or a bar or a chair. But to actually be able to achieve that same position, you need to have strength and control in the right places.
Yeah. So it's like, what's the point of doing an oversplit with one foot on a chair if you can't control that range?
Right.
Anyway. But, and honestly, I mean, a lot of the kids who are doing oversplits like that, they don't even feel a stretch. They're just hypermobile. So, and they're copying, sometimes they're copying somebody on Instagram. Sometimes they're doing what their teacher's asking them to do. And so that's with that legacy that we started talking about, right? So like, I teach the way I was taught, and I try to do a little better job. I mean, I think that that's the mentality of most teachers. I teach the way I was taught. I use the training that I was given, and then I try to do a little bit better job than my teachers did. Enough time has passed that they're coming up with new things. And sometimes you have this incredible creativity where the teachers come up with these wonderful, wonderful solutions. But like, it can't just be because it's always been that way. And we have to change that.
100%.
We have to change that. And that's what I'm really excited about for the future, is changing.
Yeah. And doing things like what you're doing with PointSafe is a great way to start making a dent in that.
Trying.
So at this point, I think it's a good opportunity for a special segment on the show.
Oh.
So on every episode, we have the final bow. Essentially, it's your take-home message. We've talked about a lot of different things, but if people were listening to this and walk away with only one piece of information, what do you hope that they walk away with?
that dance doesn't always have to be so painful.
Mm.
But they don't have to normalize their pain.
Yes.
They don't have to say, "But I've always had shin splints." They don't have to say, "But I've always had back pain." But I've always,
Yep. Yeah. I think that's a really important one. And, even things that I see where it's like, well, pointe is supposed to be painful, or working on a certain skill is supposed to hurt. Mm, let's talk about that a little
Maybe not. Maybe not.
bit.
Yeah,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah, I think that's a really important one. And then, last and certainly not least, the shameless plug. This is your opportunity to talk about anything that you have going on that you want to share with the good people of the world. So
Yeah.
go for it.
So the next installment of PointSafe starts August 7th, and we have nice small classes. So we usually have between 5 and 10, 15 students in a class, who are all teachers. And to enroll in PointSafe, you have to be a teacher who is actively teaching class so that you can get the videos of your dancers in and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And so I'd love to have more teachers. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, wonderful. Yes, everybody who is a dance teacher, please go check out this program because like Kendall was explaining earlier, it's weeks of very collaborative learning, talking about very important topics to keep dancers safe and healthy and help you have more in your toolbox too as a teacher, and feel more support. So go check out the program.
Thanks.
Well, Kendall, thank you so much for your time today. It has been amazing getting to chat with you again. Dance Med Spotlight is hosted and produced by Alyssa Arms. We discuss all things dance medicine. This has been another episode from Dance Med Spotlight. The Dance Med Spotlight is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present.